of two kingdoms. But now we need to ask the question, what do we owe to the kingdom of Caesar, which, by the way, is the civil government, and what do we owe to God? There's something that we owe to Caesar or to the political power, and there's something that we owe to God or to the church. The question is, what do we owe to each? Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 13, and let's take a close look at this. Deuteronomy 4 and verse 13. It's speaking here about the giving of the Ten Commandments, and it says this, "So he," that is God, "declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, the 10 Commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone." How many tablets of stone were the 10 Commandments written on? 2 tablets of stone. Now, let me ask you, could God have written the 10 Commandments on 1 tablet of stone if he had wanted to? Of course. Could he have written the 10 Commandments on 3 tablets of stone? Absolutely. Why did he write the 10 Commandments on 2 tablets of stone? Simply, we're going to notice, because the first 4 commandments have to do with our responsibility towards God, whereas the last 6 commandments have to do with our responsibility with our fellow human beings. In other words, the first 4 commandments point out our duty, our vertical duty with God, and the last 6 point out our horizontal relationship with our fellow human beings. Now let's notice that. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. Deuteronomy 6, 4 and 5. It says there, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." So you'll notice here a very important declaration by God. We shall love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our strength. Now let's go to Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18. Leviticus 19 and verse 18. It says there, speaking about our relationship with our neighbor, "You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." So how many great commandments do we have in the Old Testament? Number 1, love supreme for whom? For God. And secondly, loving our what? Our neighbor. Which table of the law describes our love for God? The first 4. Which table of the law describes our relationship with our fellow human beings? The last 6. Now let's go to what Jesus had to say about this, because Jesus confirms what I'm saying. Matthew 22, verses 34 through 40. Matthew 22, beginning with verse 34. "But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer," by the way, he's not a secular lawyer, he's an expert in the writings of Moses, in the law of Moses. So it says, "Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, 'Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?' Jesus said to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind.'" Did we read that in the Old Testament somewhere? Yes, we read it in Deuteronomy chapter 6, right? So that's the first and great commandment. Notice verse 38. "This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So you'll notice that the law of God was structured in such a way that you have our duty towards God and our duty towards our fellow men. But let me ask you, does the civil government have the right to enforce the second table of the law? Does the civil government have a right to punish those individuals who steal? Yes. Does it have the right to punish those individuals who kill? Yes. Does it have a right to punish those who beat up on their parents? Yes. Does it have a right to prosecute those who speak false witness against somebody else and ruins their reputation? Absolutely. In other words, the second table of the law is the realm of the civil government. But the first table of the law, the civil government can have nothing to do with, because it has to do with our duty and responsibility and worship towards God. In other words, the civil government has been established to preserve the civil order. The first 4 commandments are off limits for the civil government. Now, it's interesting that Jesus Christ, and now we're going to go to speak a little about Jesus, because his experience is actually going to be repeated in his people at the end of time. It's interesting that Jesus was never accused by the Jews of breaking the last 6 commandments of God's law. Jesus was never accused of disobeying the civil laws of Rome. All of the accusations that the Jews launched against Jesus were things that had to do with the first table of the law. You say, where does the Bible say that? Well, go with me to Mark chapter 2 and verse 7. Mark 2 verse 7 is describing a paralytic, and Jesus says some very controversial things. He says to this man, your sins are forgiven. And notice what his enemies said. Mark 2 verse 7. Why does this man speak blasphemies like this? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Let me ask you, what table of the law does that accusation have to do with? The first table, because they're saying that he's making himself what? God by forgiving sins. Notice John 10, verse 33. At this point, Jesus had said, I and my Father are one. And they understood very well that Jesus was saying that he was one with his Father in a special sense, in the sense that he was God. Notice John 10:33. The Jews answered him, saying, for a good work we do not stone you, because they picked up stones to stone him, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself what? God. There it is again. He's being accused of violating the first table of the law. Notice John chapter 9 and verse 16. John 9 and verse 16. Here he's going to be accused of breaking the holy Sabbath. Let me ask you, on which table of the law is the Sabbath? It's on the first table of the law. It's a duty that we owe whom? That we owe God. It says in John 9 verse 16, Jesus has healed a blind man. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not what? He does not keep the Sabbath. By the way, were they right or wrong? They were wrong. He did keep the Sabbath. He just didn't keep the Sabbath according to all their rules and regulations. He kept the biblical Sabbath, not the Sabbath of the rabbis. Also, John chapter 5, verse 16 and verse 18, where Jesus has healed a man who was paralyzed, a paralytic. Notice they accused him once again of violating the Sabbath. Verse 16, for this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath. Verse 17, but Jesus answered them, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. Therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him, because he not only broke the Sabbath, at least in their minds, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with whom? Equal with God. See, once again, everything has to do with the first table of the law. One final reference from the Gospels, and there are others, but I've only chosen a few, where Jesus is accused of taking God's name in vain. On which table of the law is that? That's the first table of the law. It's the third commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Notice John 8, verses 58 and 59. Jesus said to them, most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Who was Jesus claiming to be? Remember at the burning bush, Moses asked, what is your name when I go to Israel? I am that I am has sent me unto you. Did the Jews understand that Jesus was taking the name of God and applying it to himself? They most certainly did, because it says in verse 59, then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. So we find in God's holy law 2 tables. The first table describes our duty towards God. The second table describes our duty towards our fellow men. The first table belongs exclusively to God. In other words, the civil power has nothing to do with the first table. It has much to do with the second table in order to preserve the civil order.